Welcome back. Year 10 to part 2 of the lesson, and we just got up to this part of the poem. The fourth stanza about the old hotel room. One student sent a message on Show My Homework saying, what does this bit mean? Doing this and that to what and whom, learning who you are, learning what I am. There are a range of things that the couple at this stage, I guess, could be getting up to in that hotel room. Whether that's physically or whether learning implies that this is about conversation and getting to know one another. I also got a question saying, why does the writer in the last line of this stanza use what rather than who? And that's an interesting question. It could simply be a little bit of variety from the line before, or perhaps you've got other possibilities, like the idea of the speaker dehumanizing himself. So you've got this idea of someone who feels like they've been used or objectified, and so they're a what rather than a who. Or alternatively, this idea of getting to the core of themselves, learning the what's, the truth about themselves, rather than that the who, which is perhaps a false identity that people build up, surface identity. So what as something more about the truth of that particular person. And then we move on into the final two stanzas, and again we get the idea here with the crack across the ceiling, the hotel walls appealing, more detail of this hotel room. These lines, I guess, help us to visualise the scene, and also, as a couple of students mentioned, feed back into this idea of the dichotomy or juxtaposition between a cliched view of Paris, those places like the Louvre and the Notre Dame, and then the more real location of the hotel room, and this idea of it doesn't matter. This is a quote from one student: it doesn't matter where you are if you are with the right person. One person asked about the crack across the ceiling and said, is there a hidden meaning here? Well, I don't know. Because I think primarily we're getting a visual description of the room that makes it seem real. But you could also talk about the idea of a crack being something that something gets in through. So the reality gets in to this scene. They can't keep things hidden, or they can't sort of keep in this safe space. We've also got the idea of a crack as kind of damage, maybe lasting damage, which links way back to stanza 1, where students have picked up on the lasting damage of the war wounds from previous relationships. And so we move on into the final stanza, and quite a few people picked up on the idea that by now things have changed in the poem. One student pointed out it seems to get faster here. Another asked, why has he changed from a literal to a metaphorical meaning of Paris at this point in the poem? And a third student said, he does want to talk about love now, but he's using Paris as a metaphor. So you have definitely got this idea that it's arguable that by now Paris is a stand-in for love. Don't talk to me of love, but let's talk of Paris. I'm in Paris with the slightest thing you do. I'm in love with you. Is one possible reading of that. And so all the ideas that we talked about before with Paris of romance and glamour and love and so on. So why have things changed? Well, a couple of students sort of suggested that he is falling in love with this person. His feelings are developing, or perhaps having been buttoned up at the start and not wanting to talk, now there's a sort of growth in confidence, and you can let those feelings out, and that's why now you can sort of see I'm in Paris is, rather than being repeated around about once a stanza, we've got it 3 lines in a row. I'm in Paris with the slightest thing you do. I'm in Paris with your eyes, your mouth. I'm in Paris with all points south. So a student said he lists the things that he likes about her, so that's a sign that he's falling in love. One student said, what does this line mean, all points south? Well, again, there's more than one possible explanation here. You've got the idea of a euphemism. If you're thinking eyes, mouth, and you keep going down, all points, the whole rest of the body, perhaps. Or you could go eyes, mouth, and then if you go directly down from the mouth, there might be a particular part of the female anatomy that's of interest to this speaker. And obviously those two interpretations of that line suggest slightly different meanings. One's more romantic, he's in love with the whole person, and one's more to do with his sexual desire for that person at this moment. Okay, am I embarrassing you? I'm in Paris with you. So that last line is the same as the title of the poem, I'm in Paris with you. But perhaps, as one or two students astutely pointed out, the meaning has changed from literally I'm in Paris with you, I'm in that place, to I'm in Paris with you as this romantic statement, I'm in love with you. Here's some more of people's favourite bits that we've just not had a chance perhaps to pick up on in that discussion that you can read on the screen. Hopefully if you left a comment about your favourite part of the poem, or an insight into part of the poem, or a question about the poem, I have covered it at some point during the discussion, and I hope you feel like going through the poem in this way has helped you to understand it a bit more, and sort of maybe fed into your enjoyment of the poem. And yeah, the third one on the screen there, just to pick out one example, this idea that the resentment of the start of the poem has faded or been replaced with this feeling of love by the end. It is perhaps one way to think about the structure of the poem. But I guess really, in terms of the poem, I ask you to think about, is the poem's view of love romantic or not? And maybe ultimately there's two ways I think of viewing this poem overall. And one interpretation has got this idea, more romantic reading of the poem is here's this speaker who's been damaged by his experiences in love before, and he's using this word Paris as a way of coping with talking about love. It's too painful to talk about love, so Paris acts as a stand-in, but by the end this kind of confidence is coming back, and so it's clearer to us as readers that Paris means love. And that fits in with the view that he does love this person, and being with this person is more important to him than being in some sort of romantic location. But I've spoken to people before who read the poem in another way, a more cynical way, where this character is, as he admits in stanza 2, on the rebound, and he says, I don't care where we bound. So you've got more of this lustful figure who is using the addressee of the poem, the you, and wants to sleep with the you as part of getting over his ex, but isn't really interested in it on a deeper level. And if you wanted to push that interpretation, you might look at things like, when he talks about what he likes about the other person, he talks about eyes, mouth, the body, the surface ideas rather than that person's personality. So you've got two ways of reading the poem, one more romantic and one more cynical in terms of the view of love. And if you were to write that, as we know, poems in the exam, being able to acknowledge different possible meanings is an important part of showing how you understand the poem. For me, I prefer the more romantic reading of the poem, but ultimately it's for you to decide. So that's probably more or less enough, I think, for period 5 on a Friday. And as for actually answering the exam question, how would you write about an unseen poem? We'll look a little bit at that next Tuesday, period 1. And then for period 2, I'll give you another unseen poem to comment on, like we have done this week. And thank you again for all the comments and questions that you sent, because I really enjoyed reading them and thinking about those. For now, just one task. Having sort of discussed the poem now in quite a little bit of detail, could you note down 3 feelings or ideas about love that seem to come out of this poem, and just a quote to back up each one? And that would be useful then for us in our lesson on Tuesday. So thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for joining me today. Do kind of get in touch and let me know how sort of successful or useful you found this. It's the first time I've done something like this online, and based on your feedback, I'll decide whether I sort of make it a weekly thing until we can see each other again. And either way, hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later. Stay safe and cheerful in the meantime, and I'll hopefully see you soon. Have a good weekend. Thanks very much.
My father was a carpenter, my mother, she died young. I'm the eldest of my brothers, with trouble in my blood, trouble in my blood. I swore that I'd stay humble like my father was before. He built the home I live in, with sand and mud and smoke. Sand and mud and smoke. Yes, we will leave you without a trace.